I'm Diane Barrett. It is February 21st, 2022. I'm here with Lorrie Potvin. Lorrie's in Canada, so you're not celebrating President's Day, which we are in this country. So it's a holiday. No trash collection, no mail, no banking.
Okay. Well, it's Family Day in Ontario.
Really?
Yeah.
Does that interfere with your banking and mail and trash collection?
Not too much. No. Some institutions recognize the holidays, others don't. So but it's still out there for people to take off if they want to.
It's interesting. So what is Family Day?
Well, it's just a recognition that I think it came about as a really long winter. And it's like, where can we, find a holiday to interject in the middle of February sometime? So that's really, I think, was the impetus behind creating Family Day as a holiday. So, and it lines up with a number of festivals like in Quebec City or in Ottawa, although they were canceled because of COVID and because of the occupation actually in downtown Ottawa. Like Winterlude would have been happening at the same time, but because of the occupation, that's been canceled. That was canceled.
COVID has changed our life.
It has.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
It made us rethink things for sure. So this is a interview with you and myself, a conversation about your life and your occupation. So let's start first of all with asking, what is your occupation you'd like listed for this interview?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually an auto body repair and refinisher. I did my apprenticeship. I started it in 1981, so over about 42 years ago. And but so that's really what I've done for the majority of my life. Yeah, so I've spent the majority of my life working in the trades. I've as an auto body repair and refinisher. So I took my apprenticeship. I started it in 1981, so about 41 years ago. Over 40 years ago.
Have you always lived in Canada?
Yes. So when I grew up in a small town. So I was in high school in the 70s. And when I wasn't allowed to take high school shop classes, I had to take typing and shorthand and business correspondence, and it was home economics at that time. And you had to learn how to set the table for when the man came home. And you had to sew, I sewed up a book bag and learned how to do that. But I really wanted to take shop, but I wasn't allowed to. So my first job when I left home at 17 was actually as a secretary, because as girls in high school at that time, we had to take typing and shorthand. And so that was the only job I could get. And so I started work right at 17 as a secretary for the Metric Commission Canada. And I lasted 2 years. And I remember the day that I quit because I just could not sit in a chair anymore. It just wasn't my nature, but I stuck it out for 2 years. And the director, when I went in to give my notice, said, you're quitting like a government job, a for-life government job. And it was like, yeah, I know, but I just can't do it. It's not for me. And so originally I took in 1979, 1980, I took a 1-year machine shop course because I wanted to be a machinist. So it was through a government, they called it then Manpower Retraining Program. And they would target trade areas.
We had that here too. It was called the same thing. We had that here also.
Okay. Manpower. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I swear, I think they thought I was a man when I showed up in line to register for the course, because, and anyway, so I took that for a year, but I couldn't, even though I finished with the highest marks in my class, they had a hard time finding me a work experience. I was able to get a week in at Black & Decker, which was a big manufacturing plant in Brockville. And the foreman said, if he could hire me, he would, but he didn't have it in his budget. But I couldn't find a job. I knocked on a lot of doors and they were like, if I hired you, my wife would kill me. And, like you'd be a distraction to the men. Why do you want to work here? It's dirty. And so at the time I was going to school, I was actually working in a small body shop for a friend just to make spending money because I
Were you
wasn't being
living
paid.
independent of your family? Did you live alone then?
Yes, yeah, I lived
Uh-huh.
alone then. I lived alone. I left home when I was 17, and
Mhm.
so this was so then I thought, well, I'll just get a job. I'll go out looking for a job as an auto body repairer, and that's what I did. It was at the time there was a government incentive program for hiring women in non-traditional occupations. And so they paid 80% of my wage for a year, which, I mean, I was getting paid $5 an hour. So the dealership only had to pay me $1 an hour.
Oh.
The rest was being paid by the government. So I guess they figured that it wasn't going to be any loss to them if I didn't work out necessarily. Yeah. So
How long did you stay there? Just the whole year?
I stayed in the dealership until I got my apprenticeship. So I finished my apprenticeship in auto body repair. And when I wrote I went to school twice at Algonquin College for training. And that was definitely where all the men that I went to school with thought I was a man, because after a week, I went to go see the teacher because I had a sense that no one was figuring out I was a woman. And I said to him, and I don't know why I blurted this out. I said, if I had as big as breasts as my mother did, there wouldn't be a problem, like her. And I said something to the effect of her bra had, the underwires making a lot of noise in the dryer. I was just really nervous and stressed and having to tell this man that I was a woman. So I was just babbling on. And then he just had this light bulb moment and go, oh, so you're just like my niece or something. And the next day he introduced me as the first woman ever to be to take auto body repair at Algonquin College. And then of course all the guys are standing around going, who, where? And the next thing you know, they all figured out it was me. Mm-hmm. And so things changed a little bit then. It was kind of like, let's keep an eye on this chick here and see if she can do the work as well as we can. And I could. I think that's one of the things that I was better. Yeah. So I think I finished. Then I went and worked for the city of Ottawa. After I finished my apprenticeship, I received a red seal, which means that you achieve a certain amount on your exams, and that gives you a sense of pride. Mm-hmm. And I worked for the city for about 5 years in their body shop. I was the only woman in the garage there, and then I left the garage and actually went and started teaching the trade at the college.
Good for you. At what point did you discover your sexuality? You really didn't.
Well, that was way back in high school, way before. Mm-hmm. I always knew that I was different. I didn't
have a word for it, probably.
Well, that's exactly it. I was like, why don't I want to play with dolls and be with all the other girls? And, I wanted to, I would go out in the bush and build tree forts just by myself. And I wanted to play hockey with my brothers out in the driveway. I didn't really have any little girl friends. I don't know if, and then when I got into high school, I definitely knew that I was attracted to girls, but at the same time, that wasn't a place that I could even wrap my head around, because you were supposed to like boys, and if you didn't like boys, then boy, that was bad.
Don't say anything.
Pun intended. Yeah.
Right. How many brothers did you have?
I have 3 brothers.
And no sisters, right?
No sisters. Yeah.
Were you fine leaving home at 17? Was that?
Yeah, I left home at 17. It just wasn't, it was a really unhealthy,
Environment.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was my, it was violent, it was alcoholic, it was abusive. So
That was
my,
with your father? Was your mother an
yeah,
alcoholic also?
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. And he was, yeah, he wasn't a very nice man. And I found out later in my life that he wasn't and that's part of the ending of the first gear there, is that I find out through the court system that he wasn't my biological father. I'm glad you got it. Thank
I
you.
did. I've been reading it sporadically. You've had a
Yeah.
lot of abuse in your life.
Uh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think I'd be the person that I'm here today then without it. I think that I went through a lot of depression and angst and not really knowing how to deal with that and shunning probably a lot of help aside because I didn't know how to trust people. And so,
Right.
it's a pretty lonely place, but it's like coming out. When I came out in Ottawa, it was like I found my ball team, right? I found a team and I found a place to go and and that was literally, I found a ball team. There was a group of women called the Ottawa Seniors that played ball, and all of them were everybody was a dyke on the team. So it was just really a really homecoming, heartfelt moment for me. And I think that helped a lot as a young person.
Hard to pinpoint exactly when that happens, isn't it? But I can understand that.
Yeah, yeah. It was, here I went from a small town of less than 4,000 people out in the middle of the Ottawa Valley, where the most excitement was when snowmobiling on weekends or someone crashing a boat into the pier because they were drunk or something. But so there, it was very rural, very isolated. It was a town that was just built for scientists and other people to help support the nuclear energy plant at Chalk River. So it was very isolating, very rural. And so in coming to a big city, it was, and finding people like myself and that it was normalized and accepted to some extent, as much as back in the 70s and early 80s could have been. It was just a really, like I said, it was a homecoming for me. And
what position did you play on the ball team?
I played first base, and I couldn't run that fast, so I was either in right field or something.
First base is tough.
Yeah.
Actually,
yeah.
this is a side. We interviewed. Did you see that movie, A League of Their Own?
Yeah.
We interviewed a woman that started. She was part of the team in the movie, and she had to be awesome. A baseball player to be able to even audition for the parts. I would never been able to do that. So
yeah.
Patricia Pelton, her interview is on the.
Okay, I'll go check that out.
Right. Yeah. So that was fun. I remember that movie. It was a good movie. First base is hard. I've attended a lot of lesbian ball games, so I know that.
Yeah. I actually, I talk about that in the horses in my next memoir, where I talk about that whole sort of lesbian handbook where the coach goes out with first base and the first base has gone out with the fielder, and then the fielder is, anyway, it was just a little bit of a riff on how those relationships seem to sort of migrate through teams.
I was amazed at the skill of the women playing. Really, I'd only seen baseball with men or boys, basically.
Yeah.
But the women were very skilled. Not only were they good looking, but they had a lot of skill.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So when was your first relationship of significance with another woman?
That would have been just after I came out, when I was 19. And it was with Carrie Duncan, and actually we're still in contact now. And so we were together, I think probably 4 or 5 years. years, possibly. So she was older than me, and but that was my first significant relationship, and yeah, when I was 19.
How about your relationship with Thelma D?
Oh, well, I've always had relationships with motorcycles. You know, when I first moved to Ottawa, I couldn't afford a car. So I had a motorcycle, but I bought a motorcycle and I didn't even have a license to drive it. I had always driven motorcycles and dirt bikes when I was a kid, growing up with my brothers. So we would go out into the back bush, and Eric, my stepfather, he had a Can-Am 125 dirt bike. So we learned how to ride that dirt bike in the bush. And so when I came to Ottawa, I couldn't afford a car. So I bought a small Kawasaki motorcycle, but I didn't have a driver's license to drive it. But I drove it anyway. I drove it for over a year, and I drive it late into the winter as soon as I could get it out in the spring, because it was the only transportation I had. And then I finally, one day I came up and there was some police at a sort of, I'm not sure whether it was a ride check or something. And I thought, well, maybe I should go get my license, my motorcycle license. So
Be careful.
yeah, that would be the right thing to do. So I got my motorcycle license, and I've had a number of motorcycles. And then the dream, of course, well, for me, I can't say for every motorcyclist, was to buy a Harley. So, and they're expensive. And so it was a gift, a birthday. Thelma D was a birthday gift to me when I turned 50. And
To yourself?
Yeah, well, and Paula helped. Paula's my partner today. She was quite excited and was a keen supporter of me buying Thelma D.
Does she ride also?
She rides on the back, and she did try to get her motorcycle license. She had her own Sportster for, I would say, over a year, and she went through the graduated licensing too, but she just wasn't, she didn't grow up with machines, riding bikes and motorcycles like I did. So she was always just a little apprehensive. And when you're riding a motorcycle, you need confidence, and you need to have defensive driving skills. And I always drove with the understanding that someone out there wants to kill me, not on purpose, but just by, I've had people change lanes into the side of me, not seeing me, things like that. So you have to be very careful, but you also have to drive with confidence, because there's times when you have to brake hard, dropping a couple of gears, but there's also times when you have to accelerate out of danger. So it just wasn't.
A lot to it.
Yeah. So it wasn't her. So she sold the bike and said that she would ride get back on the back with me.
So. Right. She could give you direction from that position. Right.
Yeah.
How long have you been together?
This year it's coming into our 23rd anniversary in May.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So it's special. We were married, officially married in 2008. And
that's the same year we were married. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We've been married 3 times.
Okay.
And then it was legal in 2008. So that was the 3rd time. We have a segment of this called To Have and to Hold, and then they come in as a couple. And so that's growing too. People love to read those things, because if you think this is a legacy project and people get hope, younger people reading these, they want a relationship. That gives, that makes them special, makes them acceptable and safe. I think they feel safe in a relationship. So then they're drawn to have and to hold viewing. So feel free to be part of that. You and Paula, be great. So
yeah. No, I'll talk to her. I'll talk to her about it.
And you can look. I can tell you some of the couples to look for in the collection, right? And so they're all different, but we're proud of our relationships. So have you ever felt that your sexuality inhibited you in terms of your career?
I don't think so. I had thought about that question, prior to talking with you, because I thought it might be a question you might ask. But, I think that most of it came from in my field of work, being in the trades. I would say the most opposition I got was because I was a woman, not because I was a lesbian.
Uh,
It
yeah.
was, so, as especially working as an apprentice. So apprentices are only about one rung above the co-op student in a garage, right? It's that hierarchy.
Yeah.
And so there was times when I had to do really crappy, shitty jobs. And it was like, okay, I'm doing this because I'm the apprentice, not because I'm a woman,
Right.
or because
I'm
I'm a lesbian.
Uh-huh.
It's because I'm an apprentice. And so it's not cut out for everybody. So I think that that's really one of the things that helped me, was that I was quite good at it. And when I went to school, I got the highest mark. So when there was an opening that came up to teach the trade at the college I went to, the teacher that I had there, he called me when I was working for the city to come in. And so I got a year's leave of absence to come in and to go to the college and teach. And then
Did you like that? You like
I
teaching?
spent 11 years teaching there.
I guess
And
you liked it.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And that was a really good opportunity for me. But I have to say that it was also really one of the toughest times that I had in my life in terms of depression, a time when I had attempted to take my own life.
Mhm.
And it was so those years were a struggle. And but I got through that. I wouldn't have been able to take advantage of that opportunity to go to Queens if I hadn't taken my apprenticeship and got a trade license.
Mhm.
So it was, that decision I made at 19 to walk away from being a secretary for life, a job for life, came back full circle, where now, after taking my tech ed and becoming as a qualified teacher for the Ontario College of Teachers, then I was able to teach high school. So I ended up becoming a shop teacher, 30 some years after I wasn't allowed to take shop in high school. And
See,
so that was just a
you're part
really
of the
neat
change.
moment for me. And I wouldn't have gotten there without those struggles through my life, and those really sort of dark and down days, and
No,
coming
that's a
through
good
them.
statement for somebody, that everything it is not, oh, great, I'm a therapist, I'm a teacher, I'm a this. There are a lot of dark days that are steps. And when you've been abused, I think that you fragment, and then you try to put the fragments together as you become more mature. And
Yeah,
because you fragment, so you survive.
yeah, that's very, very
Yeah.
well said.
Mhm.
And I think that I am probably closer to the person I was born today
Uh-huh.
than at any other point in my life.
So
Yeah.
what was your greatest adventure in your life so far?
Oh, my greatest adventure. Okay, I think I love road trips. So my first gear was written about the sort of like a 10-day motorcycle drive. So that was an adventure that I enjoyed.
Mhm.
So I just decided I was going to take off on a road trip. So I couldn't afford a motel and gas. So I ended up sleeping in my car, and I traveled for almost a month. And I went out west to see where my great grandparents homesteaded in Alberta, and where my mom was born. So I was able to actually walk the same land and that she walked as a child.
So if you knew at some time that soon that you were going to die, what would you like to be remembered for?
Oh, I think that just like that, that I'm a good person. And I'm very thankful for a lot of things, uh, if I'd made different decisions, and I was pregnant when I was 16. And of course, at that time, there was therapeutic abortions available. And it was part of me staying in the house, staying with like a room over my, a roof over my head, and staying in the house. So I ended up having a therapeutic abortion. And I think really now that was the best thing that was chosen for me, even though I could have just run away from home. But, I can't imagine.
How did the pregnancy occur?
Pardon?
How did you have a friend, a boyfriend? Were you raped? How did the
Yeah, I had a boyfriend.
Mhm.
And because that's what you were supposed to do in high school, especially,
Right.
but it was really unhealthy all the way around. My mom actually wanted, because I had been raped before I got pregnant by Eric, she wanted me to blame him. And it was just it was all just messy. It was just bad,
Mess.
you
Never
know.
gets unmessy.
Yeah, yeah. And my mom had been convicted of a couple of crimes, when I was 7 or 8 years old. And so she had served a little bit of time in jail.
Oh.
And so it was,
You're a
so
very
there was
strong
that.
woman. You know that? I mean, you're a survivor.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
really. I can see
You
you
know,
teaching it. You have so much to give young women, men
yeah,
too.
yeah. Well, so I think that, yeah, thank you for that observation. It's,
Mhm.
I think, but I think I really knew that I could be a good person in a healthy place somewhere within me, because I just knew that there was a better life for myself beyond. But it
That's tough.
was,
The abused child feels worthless. Or
yeah,
if it was, you worth something, it wouldn't be happening.
yeah,
This is the child thinking.
yeah. And I still have anxiety today.
Mhm.
When I send texts and they don't get response, like I don't get a response or send email or something, and I'm thinking, oh my first thoughts are, what have I done wrong?
Uh,
Right? Because then my second thought is, well, it's not all about me. The world doesn't revolve around me, but it's still that little girl inside that says,
Right.
you've disappointed someone.
How many
Yeah.
books have you written? This
Well,
one. You've written other books, right?
yes, I actually have a follow-up memoir to
Okay.
that.
So
So
that you can send me that, and it's a way of saying, here's a feminist, here's her library. People can see it.
yeah, yeah, no,
Hopefully read it.
I appreciate
Buy
that.
it. Oh, you were interested in the story of your biologic father. So Eric wasn't your biologic father. He was
No,
not. No.
no.
Uh,
And I didn't, it took, I'll tell you the ending because it's in the book, but
mhm,
I went to the police when I was about 37,
mhm.
and uh, they laid charges against Eric. He was charged with rape, sexual assault, and at the time of the offenses in the 60s and 70s, he was charged with incest. So what happened was, so I thought he was my biological father,
I see.
and so I was asked to take a DNA test in when I was 39. So when the charges got into court, I was asked to take a DNA test, and he was asked to take a DNA test because at the time of the offenses, incest had to be between blood relatives. If you weren't related by blood, then there was no incest, even though there might have been abuse. So I found out 2 years later, and it was only through the court process that I found this out, that Eric wasn't my father, my real biological father.
Uh,
My
so your
mom,
mother never said anything about it, or
no, my mom would have taken that to her grave.
uh-huh.
And because she had an affair on Eric, he was actually in Halifax doing training for the Navy. And my mom was alone in Sudbury, where I was born. And she had my brother, who was just a baby. And when she had an affair with, from what I understand, it was the guy who came to fix the hydro.
Whatever word.
Yeah. So that was one of the very things that came out that I was so grateful for, was that I went to the police. It was a very scary thing, the court system.
That you did that.
And but even though the outcome wasn't what I had hoped for, this charges ended up being stayed against Eric. But the joy from that hidden blessing was finding out that he wasn't my father, that guy that could do so many horrible things to us wasn't me, wasn't a part of me.
Wasn't a part of you, right?
Yeah.
I understand.
And so
did you ever meet your biologic father? Did you ever find out who your biologic father was?
Yes. And I talk about that's the next memoirs where I talk about the process of finding how I found my biological father, and how I now have a relationship with, a sister that I never even knew existed. She's 10 years older than me, and it's been just an amazing thing. Yeah.
So what was your biologic father like?
He was dead by the time I found the family. And I don't want to say too much because it's in the book, and I've changed names because my sister, it's kind of hard to all of a sudden land in like almost 57 years later into a family that never knew you existed. One of my sisters insisted, and the family having a DNA test.
Is there anyone else in your family who is lesbian or gay?
Do you have any?
No, not really. Thanks again.
Thank you.
So very, very just grateful for you and Marge and Kelly and the work that you're doing. So thanks, and keep it up, and I will be in touch. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks,
Good
Diane.
to see you.
Yeah.
Bye.